I'm sure you'll have come across the idea of constantly repeating a small passage of music that we find difficult so that we'll be able to master it, and people will frequently call this drilling. However, in my experience, whilst this is a good starting point, just repeating a small piece in isolation doesn't mean that once we've got it down, we'll be able to play it within the context of the rest of the piece. Now, I've already released a video on this idea quite some time ago of putting things back into context. However, I found a way recently that's even more useful in terms of being able to get more repetitions done while still not just repeating one small piece. And I've nicknamed that concept looping. Now, at a micro level, we can loop through very small bits of music. So take, for example, the famous little 30-second note part of Beethoven's Fur Elise. Now, we can loop just one little bit of this, and it loops quite naturally because we don't break rhythm, we don't break fingering, we don't break the note pattern. However, the downside is we're only actually looping through half of the difficulty when we do this. But what we can actually do is we can start from the beginning of that little section. We play through the 30-second notes, we go into the next part of the main theme, but rather than continuing on, we let ourselves loop back naturally to the C7 chord that we have here. And again, because we're imagining a repeat sign, if you like, here, we're not changing the note pattern particularly. We're using a note pattern that occurs elsewhere, but we're giving ourselves the ability to keep looping through, and therefore we'll do more in-context repetitions of the 30-second notes. And this same principle works in a surprising number of pieces. So take, for example, Debussy's First Arabesque. So this little section here has always been one of the parts that I've found difficult to do, and it's one of the parts that I've practiced extensively on its own. However, what we can do is we can keep playing through after we've got through those notes, but rather than carrying on with the piece, we can imagine a repeat sign just here and go back to the point just before those notes. Again, we're not breaking the pattern of the music as it appears. We don't take any rests, we don't stop, we simply loop back. There are also other places we could do this. We could loop through the section where we have the polyrhythm, for example, so that we get more in context repetitions of that. in Chopin's C-sharp minor waltz, I always found this particular little section of repeating pairs to be tricky, and I'm not even really sure why. However, once I'd fixed it, it's something that, again, we can loop quite easily by going on beyond that. Imagine that we've got a repeat sign and looping back through from before the section starts. However, and this is where the technique becomes really powerful, it's not the only time we can use looping. So for example, we can use it if we need to build stamina, for want of a better word. And I've said before, when we're trying to play something fast, it's quite often not the speed that's the biggest problem for us, it's maintaining that speed over a longer sequence of notes. So in my video on Schubert's E-flat major impromptu that I said we could use as a piece to help us with speed building, I said we could actually loop through a section of it here so that we're getting to play a very long sequence of notes all together. However, we don't have the added complication of them all being different notes. Once we then do get to the point that we can play, say, the first 8 bars all together and really comfortably, we can actually start looping through them. And this, I think, is a way of educating our brain that in actual fact, playing fast isn't that hard. This has the advantage, of course, that we've worked through all of the problem areas and can control these notes fairly comfortably by now. The same idea would work very well in Chopin's Etude No. 2 from the Opus 25 set, where we could loop this section of the very beginning of the piece quite naturally to get into the idea of playing a longer and longer sequence of notes. And of course, we can use looping if we're practicing in rhythms or if we're practicing using a simplified variant, as I've talked about before. The video linked here gives you my 3 most used practice techniques, and I think you'll find them useful. If you're not already, please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I thank you very much for watching today and look forward to seeing you very soon.